So Ben, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, and hopefully the video, we'll see how the quality comes out. But yeah, thanks for your time. Just for the benefit of anyone that's watching this on video, can you just confirm that isn't a view out of your window behind you?
It's a painting of a beach. I'm actually at my parents' beach house, so it's not
Yeah,
far
no.
from. It's kind of a couple minutes walk down the road to go to the beach, but that's just the picture. I could have probably taken a video at the beach actually.
For anyone listening to this on podcast, that people do have an opinion of Australia and New Zealand beaches, but Ben has a beautiful picture behind him that people would be very jealous of if that was out your window, I believe. But let's jump into the chat. So what I wanted to run through, you're the second person we've had on the podcast from New Zealand, the first CTA in New Zealand. So obviously a lot of my conversation is going to be CTA heavy. But I want to go back before that and look at kind of what you did before Salesforce, what you wanted to be when you were growing up.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty standard sort of millennial going through school and university. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I left school and ended up doing a business degree. Just it was the most generic thing I could think of, and something that might have some value at some stage. And then after uni, I just did a bunch of sort of odd job admin related things. So I never really had a passion for. Well, I always had a passion for technology, but it was never a sort of a career goal for me to get into a pure technology role. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually picked up, sort of got into the business analysis, sort of general business consulting sort of world. I actually joined a company called Devante Consulting as a graduate. They're one of probably the biggest Salesforce consultant in New Zealand. And I joined there as a BA, having nothing to do with Salesforce, and then they ended up having a Salesforce practice that was really busy. So I started helping them out, and then within a couple of weeks of Salesforce, just fully immersed myself in that side of things. So went from sort of nothing, no goal to being in the technical world to kind of fully immerse myself in Salesforce and technology.
Sure. So this is something we'll cover later, but you weren't ever a developer per se. You're not like a real techie that's progressed into the kind of CTA realms.
Yeah, well, I am now. I consider myself very technical, but no, from the very start, not so much. I mean, I grew up with computers, and I actually started doing sort of basic web development in my spare time, but
Hmm.
never as a job and never beyond a hobby. It was only when I got into Salesforce that I really start getting into the development side of things.
Yeah, nice. And then you went over to London after Devante. How did that come about, and what I guess did you get from the experience of going and seeing another location, but also another Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean that was your classic sort of Kiwi Aussie OE. So nothing really work related. I was at Devante for about 2.5 years. I really enjoyed it there and was pretty happy with my job, but just got to that sort of late 20 stage where I was like, actually, I need to sort of go live somewhere else. Had a few friends in London, obviously, so just decided to move to London and spend 2 years there. It was actually Devante who knew someone in London who was able to refer me to another partner over there. So that was with Tequila. So I stayed in the Salesforce space. So sort of took that 2.5 years experience in Salesforce from Auckland and picked up a role pretty easily in Europe, in London. So similar to what it is now, London was still very active in hiring in the Salesforce space. And then just sort of worked in London market for, I think it was about 3 years there.
How did you fit all the work into your schedule when there were so many walkabouts that you could be attending?
Yeah. Oh, I think the walkabout's closed down now. I used to love the
Yeah,
walkabout.
I believe so. Yeah.
It was good for
Right.
a pretty bogan night out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, London was really busy. Like, I loved the environment there. Was sort of work really hard, but also have a lot of fun. So, yeah, it was good. The work there is not it's not too dissimilar to New Zealand. The scale there is much bigger, so you're dealing with clients and environments that are in a lot of instances multiple countries and multiple currencies and large implementations. So although the work was very similar, I think the scale over there was much larger. So that was a really good experience, especially when I started to move more into the architecture space.
Sure. Yeah, I think we see a lot of people obviously going both ways, right? So London to Sydney and Auckland, and definitely we're seeing more people now going that way as well to get some further experience.
Yeah.
Do you think that experience has played a massive part in where you're at now in terms of your personal development?
Yeah, massively. Like I think I wouldn't be where I am today. Like I might not even be a CTA or sort of where I am without having that London experience, or it probably would have just taken me more time. I think, and it was never my intention. I literally went to London to go have fun and explore Europe. But on like an added bonus, it was probably huge for my career. I'm working at Tequila was really good. So it was sort of about 100-man Salesforce partner there, dedicated Salesforce partner. They had two CTAs there when I joined, and I think there's been about 13 or 14 CTAs who have since worked at Tequila at some stage, have come out of there. So it was a very sort of technical architecture focused firm. So that was really helpful. And then, yeah, just the working on large clients, tens of thousands of users, multiple country. I even spent a bit of time in California and San Francisco doing projects over there, and then across Scandinavia and Germany, France. Like it was awesome being able to travel for work as well. But yeah, by the time I came back to New Zealand, I had a wealth of experience. Felt like I knew so much more than when I left, and coming back, just having worked at companies like Tequila and Accenture and having these big global brands under your CV was a massive help when I came back to New Zealand, and not only started looking for work here, but also when I joined Cloud IT, just getting clients on board and having being able to reference these clients and testimonials from other clients was really really useful.
Sure. And how was that kind of transition back into New Zealand? Because, like you said, you've gone from working on these projects with thousands of users, multi-country, and so on. So then, how not because it's not. I mean, I'm sure there's lots and lots of challenging projects in New Zealand, but
Yeah.
going to a potentially smaller scale because a lot of people think once I've hit that scale, I need to stay at that scale.
Yeah. I mean, I really like that. There's so many pros and cons to doing big projects versus small projects, or big clients versus small clients. I mean, definitely the projects and clients were smaller here, but A, you can take all that knowledge from London. B, I really enjoyed it anyway, because I think with smaller projects, you can do many more things and you can actually innovate a bit more with the platform and do things that aren't tied down as much by governance and politics and things like that you get with bigger projects. On the flip side, I enjoy doing big projects too. Being at Deloitte now sort of helped me do more of that after coming from a smaller partner previously. So I like big projects in that they're usually more impactful and affecting more people. But I love small projects because you're doing more things with the platform. You're generally innovating a bit more. You're building more functionality and doing more with the platform in a shorter amount of time, in my opinion. So I enjoyed all of the facets of that. So in all reality, I actually found settling back into New Zealand life quite easy in a way. Yeah.
Okay, nice. And then obviously we've discussed you started as a BA, you went to London, found yourself in an environment with lots of solid architects.
Yeah.
And I've heard really good things about Tequila, and I see now some of the people that are here, like the Gary Brevingtons, and
Yeah.
It seems like an amazing team to be around those kind of people. So was it then that you thought, right, I'm going to be a CTA, or did that come when you came back to New Zealand?
I think it was, yeah, definitely in London. I'd done a lot of certifications in New Zealand, and CTA was on my radar. Like it was always something I considered doing, but I always saw it as something. Well, I actually thought it was something achievable, but it was only when I got to London I realized how actually much further away it was. Because I left New Zealand thinking, I was pretty smart. I knew my Salesforce stuff quite well. It's only when I got to London, I was working with these very highly intelligent Salesforce people that I was like, holy shit, these guys are way smarter and way more than I do. There's only 2 CTAs here. Like maybe CTA is actually quite hard. So I looked into it and I was like, shit, CTA is actually quite far away. So, but it was with working with those people, I realized it was something I wanted to do. And it was still probably another 5 or 6 years from there when I actually did it. But I knew pretty early on that it's something I wanted to do. It was quite a lot of stepping stones to get there. And Tequila definitely made me aware of what it was and what kind of people needed to do it and like what the level of effort was to achieve.
Sure. So what did that journey look like from the moment you thought, right, this is it, I'm gonna really push for the CTA? How did that kind of journey take shape, and what did it look like?
Yeah, so I guess the time when you actually decide, hey, I'm actually gonna have a crack at the board review, was still probably, I would have been back in New Zealand and it was maybe about a year out. I mean, first thing you do is really got to plan back from the date, probably a good 6 months to when from the board back to like when you start studying. And there's first thing I did was just start reaching out to other CTAs. And I was lucky enough to work at Taylor where there was many other CTAs. There was some other who are now CTAs who were also sitting the board similar sort of time. So it's very good to sort of try and align to someone else who's already doing it or has done it before. Can be tough for some people who don't know CTAs, but I think you definitely want to at least reach out to CTA. Most people are pretty helpful and will at least have a chat with you and explain some things. So just get an idea of what you need to do. And then to me, it was just breaking down into knowledge study, which is just reading and watching videos and doing a shit ton of knowledge study. And then board practice, which is practicing presentations and new solutions and stuff like that. But it's a massive process, yeah.
And can you remember when you started the process, because there's, correct me if I'm wrong, 7 areas that you need to pass.
Yeah.
Can you remember where you felt your biggest gaps were and how you plugged those gaps?
Yeah. So when I first started looking at CTA, they didn't have the designer certs. It was just the CTA multi-choice, and then you did the board. So I actually did the CTA multi-choice. By the time I went to do the board, they'd released the designer certs, but they were optional. But they were really good because, yeah, like you said, there's 7 of them. They quite clearly separate the different things you need to know. And I just went and did the actual designer certs, and that was probably the easiest thing for me to find where my gaps were. Because even though I think I passed most of them, how you pass, you can kind of actually, I don't know this stuff that well. For example, I found I hadn't done much with OAuth and SSO and identity, and I was quite weak in there. And that's purely because I did the exam and I didn't do that well. So then I could study it. You also have an idea because of previous projects and work that you've done where your gaps might be. Like if you've done heaps of integration, you generally feel comfortable with integration. If you hadn't done much identity, which I hadn't, I was kind of like, I haven't done much SAML and OAuth and stuff like that. So yeah, I think they all become pretty apparent once you start doing, the exams and reading and just sort of looking back in your history.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then if someone's now sat watching this or listening to this and thinking I'm kind of ready to start that journey, what would be your kind of top tip?
It's a good question. I talked to a CTA first, like I said, just sort of get an idea of what you need to do. And what we have been doing in running a couple of programs within Deloitte and in New Zealand as well, some of the CTAs here, is just get people to read some of the scenarios and just practice. Don't even do the solution or something. Just read the scenarios, maybe just one scenario, and that will give you a pretty good understanding of what knowledge you need to know and what what breadth you need to know and how you would actually go about doing a board presentation. Because once you read one of those 10-page scenarios, which cover off hundreds, tens of, I don't know, hundreds, but a lot of requirements across sales, service, communities, marketing, then you kind of get a pretty good feel for like, oh shit, there's actually quite a lot I need to know. Because I think a lot of people don't understand is that the designer sets are really good and they give you a very good base foundation of knowledge, but it's still quite a big step up between those multi-choice exams and the board exam.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess you don't know that unless you actually get an understanding of what the board exam
and if
looks like and feels like.
Yeah, and you can actually watch. There's a lot more content online now. There used to be like Ladies Be Architects do a lot of mock presentations on YouTube and online. A lot of cities now have meetup, like architect meetup groups, and other people are doing the mock presentations. So you go and try and watch those and stuff. So the content's now is better than it ever has been, but it still seems a shorter gap than it is for a lot of people. Yeah.
Sure. And you've been back in the New Zealand market for a good few years now. So how's the market kind of been evolving over the last few years? What does a typical project look like now in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think, and I've been lucky enough to work for previously a small company, now a large company again. So it probably differs a little bit on the size of the company you're working with. But just Salesforce in general has grown massively. It was very night and day when I left New Zealand. It was still growing, and then spent a couple of years in Europe. And then when I came back, it was even more massive. Like you can see it with heaps of partners still popping up. The demand for resource, although it's affected obviously by COVID-19, the demand for resource is constantly going up, especially demand for people with even 1 or 2 years experience. Same thing happened in Australia, same thing happened in Europe. and the US. Like there's just such a demand for Salesforce resources. So that's been no different here. And then I feel like before I left, a lot of clients were still very low in their IT budgets. I think IT budgets in general across the board have got a lot higher. People's openness to SaaS technologies is a lot higher now, especially in government. So just Salesforce in general has sort of skyrocketed, and you can see it at Salesforce themselves. I think when I left, they had 3 employees in New Zealand, and I think they're about 60 odd employees now, and they've hired like sort of 20 or 30 just in the last 6 months. So you only need to look at the Salesforce AE numbers to understand how much Salesforce has grown.
Sure. And that kind of my final question you may have just answered, but we get a lot of people from overseas that are, like when they think of coming to Australia or New Zealand, they quite often think of Sydney, right, or Melbourne. Like they don't always have Auckland in their mind, or Wellington or Christchurch and so on. So you hire, obviously you're growing teams, maybe not through COVID-19, but you will again.
Yeah.
Like, why is New Zealand a great place for a Salesforce professional to come and work?
Well, I think you could look beyond just Salesforce. I'm obviously very biased, but I love Auckland. I just find it like it's a smaller version of Sydney, but for that has a lot of pros as well. I think the New Zealand market here is still huge. I think the salaries are going up and getting on par with Australia as well. I think the diversity of work here, like I said, is really good. You can do a lot of these smaller projects, but the clients are very innovative, really keen to sort of push the platforms and do quite advanced things, which I find New Zealand market a little bit ahead of in other places. I think New Zealanders are generally quite keen just to sort of push the boundaries a bit more. Again, I'm a little bit biased on that. So I think what you can do in the Salesforce space here is awesome. And I think any experience you get here is transferable to any other market in the world. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, nice. And if any viewers or listeners want to connect with you or reach out and ask any questions, where's the best place for them to contact?
Yeah, good question. I've got you can probably circulate my details, right? I'm obviously on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. Email is probably the easiest, but I'm pretty happy to do calls and talk to people and things like that. So just maybe just circulate my details after this and.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much. I think there's lots of value in there for everyone, and yeah, I think it sheds a good light on the New Zealand market, which not everyone knows about. So I'm really keen for more people to hear about New Zealand and the opportunities that it offers.
Yeah.
And yeah, really appreciate your time, Ben. Thank you very much.
All right, it's been a pleasure.